right, now let's look at the new tax law. And it's been how many months now? We're in the 8th month of the year. That means it's 8 months. But let's do the first half of this year compared to the first half of last year, 2025, to see if there's been a difference, in tax revenue, most especially since the adoption of the new tax law. So we see that for this year, 2026, about 49% increase in tax collection is what has been recorded. 49% year-on-year growth reported by the NRS and the presidency. Non-oil revenue accounted for 76 of the total of that, and the NRS replaced the FRS. We know that 4 major tax reform laws and national e-invoicing system were among all of that. So the bottom line is, when we compare tax collection for the first half of 2025 and the first half of 2026, we see there an increase of 7.33 trillion naira, and that represents almost 50% growth year on year. So first half of 2025 was 14.27, and first half of this year 21.60 trillion naira. And non-oil revenue accounted for 76. NRS, of course, we know 4 major tax reforms is what we had beginning from January 2026. We see the numbers. What about the impact? Let's discuss that now with the lead partner at Cardinal Professional Services. Mr. Emmanuel Nosomi joins us virtually. Mr. Nosomi, good morning. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Amy. Thank you for having me this morning.
Great. So, fortunately, almost 50%, that's a huge increase, and I guess it's worth celebrating. But let's remember that the essence of the reform was to increase the tax net. Can we say that this 49% increase in revenue shows an increase or a broadening of the tax net and not taxes in number?
Yes, thank you very much. I think that's one is for the NRS to celebrate. Among other promises that the new tax law actually put forward when the fiscal committee developed the framework the last time. If I can just objectively call out some of the promises that the new tax law promised every Nigerian, including the federal government, the taxpayers, and every stakeholder within the tax system. The first is tax harmonization. There is a promise that across all levels, we'll be able to harmonize taxes and eliminate multiplicity of taxes. And I think that has fairly achieved in the consolidation of all the tax law that we are implemented from 1st of January into 4 tax laws. But beyond the 4 tax laws, if you follow the news, you will see from the Manufacturer Association of Nigeria, where they publish in their confidence index that their members are still suffering, are still facing the difficulty of engaging with multiple tax collectors and agencies. That means that beyond just, the tax law becoming 4, the government needs to also be committed to seeing to it that, the collection of taxes reflect, simplicity and elimination of multiplicity that, is being targeted by that reform. The other objective that I would also like to point out is, the unification of revenue. And that could be seen in the numbers that you have spoken to. I think what the government has been able to do in this first half, of implementing this law is to put in place infrastructure, to see to it that tax collection is more digitalized, and then they are able to get more people to pay in taxes, particularly around the issue of VAT and the fiscalization of VAT. The subject of e-invoicing has assisted the federal government to ramp up VAT collection, and state governments are now smiling to the bank. You can see that has been the biggest, conversation on the table, even in the political space, where the federal government is very bold to say that state government are now collecting more money, and they are able to use more money at the state level. But the experience of the taxpayer, we also need to be able to speak to it. Has it been very, very good when it comes to some of these aggressive implementations from the NRS? When it comes to digital collection, we saw a system change where some taxpayers were moved from the old platform, that's called the tax promise, to the Red 360, and many taxpayers actually suffered significant challenges transitioning to that new platform. At least I'm aware of many taxpayers that were unable to file their tax return as that when due, and they are facing consequences of penalty, because of some of the glitches that were experienced, with the system of transition. Also with e-invoicing, we've seen instances where the, access point providers, the APP that have been designated by, NRS, has come back with, challenges with the cost of running the platform, and where taxpayers have to also cough out money to be able to, meet the 31st July deadline, for complying with that particular regulation. So it looks as if, from the collection standpoint, the NRS may have won, the federal government may have won, but more attention needs to be paid to see to it that some of the benefits of the regime that was promised to taxpayers, begin to also trickle down to the taxpayers, so that the government doesn't appear as the only winner, in all of this.
So I'm glad you balanced it, from the taxpayers and the revenue collectors, the government in this case. And you also, of course, referred to the promises. But we can say that the small businesses, at least that category of promises, wouldn't you say those ones are being fulfilled at this time?
Yes. So the law is very clear. As a small business, if your revenue is below the small company threshold, then you are not expected to pay tax. But you know that we have just implemented this law for just 6 months. The cycle where these businesses will be filing returns is after the completion of the 12-month period, where they will know whether they have actually, enjoyed that benefit. But those people that we can categorically say that have enjoyed the benefit of, relieving the people at the bottom of the pyramid from taxes and focusing on the people that can really pay the taxes, the people that fall under the pay-as-you-earn category or the personal income tax, where the first 800,000 has been exempted, and also the rent relief that was brought on the table by the federal government. Our statistics has also, shown it when, HR department started implementing, this provision. We realized that more than 70% of the people that are actually in the net for payee will not so much enjoy enough benefit, from that 800,000 relief. That then suggests that government may need to reevaluate that threshold, so that more people can fall into that bracket that are able to, end that relief, even in the face of the inflationary pressure in the economy, so that the micro side of things can be a bit more, friendly, for the masses in Nigeria.
Yeah, it sounds like it still fits into, the conversation of translating the gains we see with the macro data to the micro. It seems that even when it comes to the tax reform too, there's a need to be more intentional about that.
Very correct, and give it to the government. Some of the policies that the government has embarked on is very, very effective. We begin to see that, these policies are beginning to transit from the gestation period to the fruiting period, and businesses are beginning to stabilize from the stability in the forest, and to the certainty when it comes to some of the tax law that would apply when it comes to business doing business. But it is actually important that we pay attention to two things that really typically speak to the micro side of things, which is the cost of food and energy that affects the masses. As long as businesses are thriving, but the masses are still facing the brunt of the economy, the government may not be able to earn the full credit for some of the policies. And this also applies in what we are seeing from the tax angle. Some of the thresholds that have been set, it appears that many households, will to benefit from that threshold because those thresholds just appear too low at the moment. So the government may need to consider reviewing those thresholds so that more people at the lower pyramid can actually benefit from some of these reliefs.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Emmanuel Nosomi, for helping us bring out, the performance and progress of the implementation of the new tax law in the country, at least in the first half of this year. Mr. Emmanuel Nosomi is the lead partner at Cardinal Professional Services.
Thank you very much.
Let's take a short break now. When we come back, we'll discuss tourism. Please stay with us.